let's dive into the greatest hits live album and DVD. So we had talked a little bit about it before, that you were the one that's mixing it. You talked about isolating Sean's bass parts, different things. Let me just share my screen real quick. So I think I by accident already showed this picture, but can you see this? So,
oh yeah, there we
see
are.
this picture. So this is you and I and my friend Frank. This is in front of the venue, the Bronson Center. This is, you did the sold out Toronto show, sold out Ottawa show. All the fans knew that you were recording both and filming both. And the goal is for this to be a live greatest hits album and or DVD. And I have a quote sent in from somebody that helped make sure that the drums sounded and looked as good as possible that night. So this is from Jordan Gauthier, who's a drum legend in Canada, working with Alexis on Fire and the Arkells and Silverstein and Finger 11. So he says, Steve is a real gem, one of the kindest people I know, an immense talent, both on stage and as a performer, and in the studio as a producer. It's always a good day in my eyes when you're spending it with Steve Moe. Regardless, if he has horrible taste in hockey teams, it's always the hockey. It's hard to be a Leafs fan with Ottawa fans and Montreal fans. He says, you think someone who hasn't tasted a playoff series win in a while, that they wouldn't have such great taste for picking good lunch spots. So anyways, a little jab from Jordan Gauthier.
Yeah, he's a beauty, man. He's so good. I remember I shared the quote from his last episode that you had. He's such a hardworking dude. He's just got a great attitude and just a good hang. He's an awesome guy.
Did you feel more pressure going into that Toronto and Ottawa show, knowing it was being filmed and recorded, or is it all just the same?
Yeah, you feel pressure in a sense of not the playing aspect, because the playing aspect, you just got to do your thing, right? You got to hope that every show, if it was recorded, it would be good. But more of like just the technical sense, like things get recorded properly? Like, is this is the being on the production side, is like, is the gain staging properly set properly? Are things going to come back distorted? Is this mic going to get muted for half a song? Like, it's more of those things, the technical part, that you're more nervous for. But the playing part, I mean, that's what makes live and a song on Spotify, like that's what you want. You want those little mistakes here and there. That's what makes it live. But it was more of the technical part, because I knew I'd be getting the files afterwards, and I want to know how they're going to be laid out in my Pro Tools. Are going to be easy to work with, and so it was more of that. But I think I can speak for all of us, and we just wanted to have a good show, and I'm sure it would translate digitally.
So in that picture that I showed with the three of us after the show, you actually had the hard drive in your hand. So you collected the hard drive with all the audio files, and you'll be the one that's editing and mixing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be so editing. When you're editing a live show, it's more so just like, if a lot to do with vocals, in a sense where you're not singing perfectly like this live, right? You're moving around. So there's some parts where the volume's like super loud, and there's some where it's like you're far away and stuff like that. Well, in the studio, you'd want it to be the proximity to be the same all the time. So you're basically just automating, like making this louder, making this a little lower, or it's like he really sang loud on that one, so it's kind of it's clipping, like there's a bunch of distortion on it. So now I got to go declip everything, and just like all those things that just don't sound annoying or like offensive when you're listening to it. So that's just going through all that. And you got to go through bar by bar and sort of making sure that there wasn't a huge noise that popped through the microphone at that point. And you just you want to comb through all those things. So that's what I'm at now.
And I guess you would have to maybe edit the start and end of songs, of like how they flow.
So you fade in and fade
other.
out, right? So you just got to pick those moments of how, and then you want to automate with the mixing side. You want to automate for parts where the crowd singing along to a lot of things. You want to push those mics forward, right? And then you want to bring them back when you're when you're in the bigger moments because of, you know, just the way phase cancellation works, stuff like that. So it's a lot of trickery there and a lot of volume automation back and forth. But yeah, it's cool. There's so many good moments, and you get to see the reaction of songs, right? You know, the whole, like, all of one thing pretty much Scott's drowned out because they're singing the entire song. And at that point, you just leave all those mics active the whole time.
And how did you choose which of the hits would make this greatest hits album? Because, you know, most bands never have a hit, or they don't have enough hits
to make
even
just to have a greatest hits is
nuts. And with Finger 11, I mean, I was at that show and I know all the albums and all the songs. And if you guys actually have more hits than you can put on a greatest hits album. So if you guys have, say, 20 hits, you played about 18 of them, almost all of them. How do you choose? I guess it has to flow as a show as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the decision was mainly for like vinyl, and there's only so much time you could put on, and, you know, whatever it was. So it's like, those are the songs that you got to put on, right? You got to put on 12 or 13 as opposed to 17 of them. So to choose the songs was actually quite comical, because, again, the guys being so humble that they're like, if management or people are tossing around some song titles, and they're like, I don't know about that one. And we're like, why? It was like number one. That's called a hit. You could put it on there because, you know what I mean? It's a hit. You have a bunch of them. And they're like, yeah, it was a hit. It's like, that did well. It's like, yeah. And then you show the numbers. It's like, they're like, oh shit, I guess it did do well. Like, again, like that's how humble these guys are, that they don't care about that stuff. And they it was kind of cool. They deferred to me for a lot of things. So like, I'm like, guys, if I'm a fan, that song better be on there. Like, I better see that song on the greatest hits, because I'm a fan. I'd be disappointed if that didn't make it on there. Right. And that's how it kind of got picked. So it was like, it went back and forth for a while, for like months, trying to pick. And I remember they were saying, it was this funny comment. We were all on a conference call. I forgot who in the band had said it. It could have been Rick. And it's like, oh, is it weird that, like, you know, we have like, you know, one thing and then like, you know, Drag You Down, or it's like, it's heavy and like soft. I'm like, dude, like, congratulations, you wrote like hits in every genre. Like, you know what I mean? Like, not only can people not even, most people do not have a greatest hits. You have a greatest hits with like pop rock, top 40. Like, you have hits
acoustic,
everywhere. Like, yeah, exactly. So it's, to them, they're like, oh, is that going to be, a journey for the listener? I'm like, dude, like, that's incredible that you even have that problem. You know what I mean? Like, so it was me saying on the call, being like, guys, that's kind of like that's an incredible accomplishment. Like, I would say, like, own that. You got to own that, because not everybody has that. And that's, and then eventually it was like the song order. It's like, okay, now we have the songs picked. What's the order? And really, there's no right or wrong order. When it's the greatest hits, they're all great songs. It's just picking for vinyl, I guess, like which sides or whatever.
Yeah, you talking right now reminded me that when I did the interviews with the other two members, that every time I dropped stats of like, oh, that went to number one, that broke this record, this was on the charts for this long, this time's multi-platinum.
Yeah.
Both guys were like, oh, that's the first time I hear this. Like, yeah, basically they said they never pay attention to charts and stats.
I'm telling you, and that's not a lie. I know, like, a lot of people like, oh, like, really? Like, I'm that famous, and but, they do know behind closed doors. These guys generally don't know those things. They don't care. They just, once the song is out, it's not theirs anymore. It's the fans, and let them enjoy it. And that's how they carry themselves with everything. It's pretty admirable.
And when I end a part with Finger 11 and go into something else, a different subject, I would do like a wrap up of like, okay, let me just in a nutshell give you what you accomplished in your career. And both guys were like, wow, I guess we've actually done some cool stuff. Like, they were hearing like their obituary, like for the, their biography for the first time, which was cool. Yeah. So is there a timeline at all for the greatest hits album? Like, it doesn't have to land at that time, but do you have a vision for when you would like this to come out, or
I think everybody I mean, there's always like what the band hopes for, and then what the reality is of, there's a bunch of people involved, and fitting into the right, time of release for labels and stuff like that. I mean, I'd say next year is a pretty safe bet in 2023. Hopefully, mid-year, something like that. Yeah, so it'll definitely be out hopefully in first half of next year at some point. Hopefully, right? That's what we're aiming for.
And there was somebody else at that Ottawa show that made sure you guys sounded as good as possible. So you had Jordan that was focused specifically on the drums, but then you had the sonic scientist, Dan Preston out front. So he was the front of house sound tech. Is that correct? Yes.
Yep.
So Dan is a monster working with all these amazing artists as well. And this is what Dan has to say. He says, Steve is a beast. One of the most multilateral, good word, dudes in the industry. I have a high appreciation for people in this industry that cover so many bases and do it all very well. Steve is one of those guys. He lives and breathes music. He's been a true champion of me as well, and that respect is definitely shared. Love working with him and the whole Finger 11 camp. So that's from Dan Preston.
Awesome. Yeah, Dan. Listen, we can only do so much on stage. That's the person that makes it translate out there, right? So they're sort of in charge. They're the last line of defense between rehearsing, the way we look on stage, the way we perform, the way we play. That's our last line of defense between us and the fans. It's got to go through that one final person, right? And Dan, I've been the biggest fan of Dan since I've seen him with other bands, but there's always that after shows, people are like, oh, great show. But every time Dan's on the gig, it's always like, great show. You guys sounded phenomenal. That's the best I've ever heard you guys in years. And it was like this common thread of like, oh yeah, every time somebody says that's because Dan's, it's like Dan's. And again, me being the guy that cares about the entire thing, right? Like from the production standpoint to the track listing and stuff like that live, that's important to me. I need to know that what we're doing is translating out there. And I need to make sure that happens time and time again. So anytime it's like, hey, we got a tour coming up, or we got a show coming up, it's like right away I'm like in the group chat, it's like, go get Dan Preston, make sure he's number one. He's always one for me, right? And it's not to knock whoever, we've been with a ton of guys who are incredible. I don't know, Dan. I think Dan gets the band really well, but I also think we got a good relationship too, and he works his ass off, that guy. Like anything we need, he's always looking to improve himself every show too. It's not like one of those guys that's like, yeah, I got it, I can handle it, and then it stops there. Dan's every day, like we share, I just bought this new plugin, I'm gonna try to use this live on like kick drum and shit like that, and he's great, he's awesome. So I love having him. The whole band loves having him on board.
I was going to say, you must connect with him as him being a studio audio guy as well.
And he's also a ridiculous guitar player.
Yeah, the playing with Clark Nova, and I see him post 15-second videos online of him just playing.
Yeah,
and man, this guy shreds. Like,
he's crazy good. Yeah,
it's unreal.
And what you can appreciate is people understanding their role as well when they're put into a situation. When Dan comes, Dan's not Dan the shredder on guitar. We all know, that we see videos. He comes as like, hey, I'm the guy that's going to make you guys sound awesome tonight, and he plays that role, and he plays it so well. And yeah, I can't say enough about Dan.